eighth wonder of the world, basically a geek show. And here are your hosts, Mike and Jack.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 41 of Basically a Geek Show. I am Mike. Joining me, as always, is Jack.
Good evening, everybody.
You'll have to forgive, Jack, everyone. We're actually recording a day later as, Jack's voice decided to just not show up for work yesterday.
Yeah, it was one of those things that just kind of happened, and, I felt fine. I felt normal, just, no sound, so, you know.
Yeah, so, forgive Jack if he sounds a bit, raspy today. He's still kind of recovering from that. But, we're going to dive right in. We've been talking about Warlords of Draenor has on and off been a topic of the show since we first started doing it. We started the show, it wasn't right at BlizzCon last year, cause I think we started a couple months after BlizzCon, but we of 2013, we started early 2014. And so, since the show began, we on and off, whenever there's been news, we've kind of touched on Warlords of Draenor. Well, the day has finally come. Warlords of Draenor has been out for about a week at this point.
Yeah, a week today, actually.
Week today.
Well, no, a week as of, midnight Pacific time. It's basically a week, yeah.
Yeah, more or less a week. It's been out a week. And wow, we're gonna give our thoughts, because this has been something that has been a mainstay of our show. And so, now that everything's been said, all of the stupid reality TV tie-ins have been aired, the launch has been experienced, what do you think, Jack?
My opinion is going to differ greatly from a lot of people as to the actual success of the launch of Draenor. There have been, and I don't doubt that these people were having problems, because it got to the point that Blizzard yesterday announced that they were giving everyone whose account was active at launch a week of free game time. Mm-hmm. So for Blizzard to do that, then there were definitely legitimate problems. And I know you've had a similar experience to me, though, where on our server, besides being in queue one or two times for maybe 20 minutes or so, we haven't had any problems at all.
No, full disclaimer, I didn't play right at launch. Of course, it launched at 3 a.m. about a week ago, and the reason it launched at 3 is because it works on Blizzard's time. Blizzard is located in California, so it was midnight for them. I didn't play because I had work the next day, and, pushing myself to stay up till 3, and then playing for an hour to get 2 hours of sleep just wasn't something I was looking forward to.
I say, to hell with the youth of Canada. You should have just called in.
Well,
they don't need education every day.
Well, our guildmate and friend, Doc, who was the first in our guild to reach, the new level cap of 100, he got there pretty fast, a couple of days, and he was like, I booked work off for this, so, I wouldn't have been alone had I done that. But I did play the very next day, after I got home from work, and according to the statement that Blizzard sent out, they said that the problems that they were responding to apparently took place over a couple of days. So I was right there the next day. I did not experience any problems whatsoever, or nothing was lagging for me, nothing seemed glitchy, everything worked as intended. The, big thing that people have been complaining about have been the, long queue times, but I don't queue for crap when an expansion hits. I quest. I don't even consider going into the dungeons until I've hit level cap of whatever.
Well, I think when they're saying queue times, they're talking about queue times to get into the game.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and there were also people saying that the garrisons were bugged and not working at all. Like you couldn't get into your garrison, it would boot you from the game or something.
That happened to me one time.
Yeah.
What happened was, I harfed back to my garrison, and it worked normally, but as soon as I appeared back into my garrison, it kicked me to the loading screen again, and then kicked me off. And then I tried logging back in, and it wasn't working, but then I just kind of sat up, closed the game, did some other stuff, and came back like 10 minutes later, and I tried logging in, and it worked perfectly. So, I get how if that happened to you more than once, if that was a more regular occurrence, that would be a pain in the ass, but just from my personal experience, it was relatively smooth sailing. Again, that one glitch happened to me one time, and I'm pretty forgiving of one glitch in the early days of expansion. You're going to have hiccups like that. So, in my experience, the launch was fine, things worked. On a technical side, I have no complaints. I liked it, and I think I'm going to be doing this more often now, even if I don't have to go into work the next day, of giving it a day before jumping in, because when I did Pandaria, I jumped right in when that thing launched, and we've talked about it before, how it was so crowded we didn't even know what the hell we were doing.
You know what? That was a magic moment, sir. I would not trade that for anything, and you're a pussy.
I'm not saying I traded either. Okay, I'm just saying. But obviously a day after an expansion launches, there's still going to be a considerable crowd there, but it didn't seem too bad. Like, it didn't seem like I was fighting just to find things to click on, like in a mass of players or anything. Like, it all seemed, it was a decent sized crowd, not too much, not so much that it made questing impossible. So this might be my new thing, Airwolf. Airwolf was a very special moment for everyone, sir, but I don't think it's something that we need to go out of our way to try to replicate. that it just sort of happened on its own, and that's what made it magical. But yeah, technical side, no complaints here. One minor glitch on my end, and it resolved itself very shortly, so I'm happy on that front. And you, again, I know you didn't have any problems, and you were playing not right at launch, but like a few hours after launch. So. Yeah,
I logged in on launch night. I went through the initial starting zone, basically, of Tanan Jungle. I got all the way up to, I logged out pretty much as soon as I found it in my garrison. And, I didn't have any problems with it, except for some lag issues, which, expansion launch night, you're gonna have that, and it really didn't, it's whatever. And it wasn't even all that noticeable. Like, every few seconds, it'd be, you'd hit a button and nothing would happen for 2 or 3 seconds, and then it's whatever. Overall though, for me, I mean, the actual launch experience was fine. I know not everyone's had that problem, but hey, we got a week of free game time exactly. Out of it, so I'm not going to bitch any. Whatever.
Exactly. It's sort of one of those things where it's like, hey, we had a great time of it, but thanks for the 5 free days, Blizzard. So that was the technical side of things. Let's talk about the actual expansion itself, the content, the story, the questing. What do you think, Jack? Where does Warlords of Draenor rank? My gold standard's kind of split. Prior to Warlords of Draenor, when it comes to story and aesthetics, Lich King, in my opinion, is still the best.
Yeah, but I still maintain a lot of your thoughts on that are bias.
Probably. But again, the concept of Vikings and cold or northern crusades against an evil, that's stuff right in my wheelhouse anyway, so I still think I'd enjoy it even if it wasn't my first expansion.
Yeah.
But I'd say thematically and story-wise, Lich King's my favorite. When it comes to the questing experience, prior to Warlords of Draenor, Pandaria was far and away the best. Pandaria's questing kind of just blew every other expansion's questing experience out of the water up till that point. So those are sort of my gold standards. So I'm asking you, how do you feel Warlords of Draenor stacked up against experiences that you think had previously been, the best?
I think it's the best. I actually do.
Okay.
I think it's better. I mean, I have the same nostalgia for Lich King that you do, but the questing experience itself, yes, they did a great job compared to compared to, I didn't play during BC, so I really can't fairly judge that.
I didn't play here in BC either, but I played the BC quest, so.
Well, yeah. You know, the BC questing sucked ass. Lich King questing was a bit better, but it still had a lot of fail in it. Borean Tundra. Borean Tundra had a lot of shit quests, most of which I remember involving mechanomes and kobolds.
I remember actually, cause you were the one who walked me through WoW, like you introduced me to WoW, and you and I had always quested together until we got up to Borean, and you're like, okay man, I'm gonna, you know, let you go quest on your own, you know, get used to questing without me, whatever, and I'm like, okay. So I go, and I'm doing questing, and you're like, so, how far have you gotten to? And I'm like, I'm at the mechanome part, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and no, that wasn't why I ditched you. In retrospect, it was a side bonus. I just didn't want to be put in the position of having to hold your hand for an eternity through the game. So I'm like, alright, gotta kick the kid out of the nest here, and, let him do his own shit.
Right into the mechanome shit pile.
Exactly. But yeah, you know, and then of course you had, Zuldrak that had all the fucking troll quests, but at least some of those, like some of the quests before the actual trolls that dealt with the Scourge were interesting. Lich King did a much better job of integrated storytelling along with the questing, but they threw in a lot of filler quests. So much fucking filler. And
they're still learning how to make a questing experience not seem so grindy.
Yeah.
And they hadn't quite gotten it by Lich King, so Lich King still had a lot of the sins that Vanilla and BC had.
In Cataclysm, it felt like they'd forgotten everything that they learned in Lich King.
Well, they pumped Cataclysm up as Vanilla WoW redone, and boy did it feel like it.
You know, I don't know, everything there's just this huge disconnect, with Cataclysm. It felt, you know, like you were just out to do stuff. And yes, you know, there were references to Deathwing and the aftermath of the Cataclysm, but you never really felt like, unless you were one of the sods that got zapped by Deathwing, yeah, you never really felt like there was any kind of impending threat or anything real was going on. Pandaria, you know, did a complete 180 from that. The questing was great. I think the only thing storytelling-wise that Pandaria suffered from was there was this kind of switching gears mid-expansion. You went from the first half, which was mostly, oh hey, a new land and it's all Asian-y and such. And yes, that's a word now.
Asian-y.
And then the second half was, oh my god, war. And it did suffer a little bit of a disconnect from that, but they did it well, and it wasn't that much of a detriment.
Well, Pandaria, they admitted as much. Someone asked Chris Metzen about the possibility of Warcraft 4, a new RTS game happening, and he basically said, the plot that we were thinking of for Warcraft 4, we made the Garrosh war plot in Mists of Pandaria. So I think it's very evident that Mists of Pandaria they had two stories. They had Garrosh, you know, goes to war and everyone has to stop him. And then they had the Discovering Pandaria plot, and they kind of merged the two together. And you're right, they did a good job of it, but it was still very clear that you could kind of see where the seams in the story were, where they had, like, sewed the two plots together.
Yeah. And, you know, so that was the thing. It wasn't bad, but you did kind of feel, like you said, the seams were sewn very well, but there were still scars, and you could tell. Mm-hmm. But the questing itself overall was done pretty good. Draenor, on the other hand, seems to be almost everything I've done has felt relevant, to the overarching story. And even if you're not going out and directly killing the orcs, you do still have that feeling that it's somehow, in the grand scheme of things, tying into that. And I think they've done a very good job with it. The Iron Horde themselves, with this whole steampunk kind of dystopian industrial vibe they've got going on, is very awesome. I love the designs for their military units and things like that. It's all very cool. I think they've done a great job with it.
I actually dig the Iron Horde, battle armor. I'd love to get a set of Iron Horde armor for my Orc alt.
I wish the Iron Horde was an actual faction you could play.
You'd roll an Orc for the Iron Horde?
Yeah. Most likely, yeah. I would.
I'd probably switch I'd faction switch my Orc alt to the Iron Horde if that were the case, cause, you know what? I'm all about Blackhand the Destroyer, so.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem playing as the bad guy.
Mm.
I have a problem with the whole, like, rainbows and puppy shit image they've tried to give the actual Horde, when they keep trying to hide them as the bad guys. Oh, well, they're noble savages, and we've had that discussion before. And that's my problem with the Horde, is it's, as the playable faction exists. The Iron Horde, though, there are 0 fucks given, and I would go for that.
Yeah, me too. I think, and you actually see a lot of, Horde fans who like the idea of the Horde as the bad guys, who are pissed off at the puppy dogs and rainbows thing that they've tried to give the playable Horde, where they're like, we liked Garrosh, and they're like, we liked Garrosh because we signed up for the Horde to play as the bad guys, and we don't like this whole Thrall, Vol'jin, reach around fest.
Yeah, and well, I mean, that started, that was, before it was a Thrall Vol'jin reach around fest, it was a,
Thrall circle jerk?
Yeah, I mean, Varian was put in the position from a character standpoint to add contrast to being kind of a warmongering hardliner, which I liked him like that personally.
I do.
Because I'm a warmongering hardliner. And I could relate. So,
my favorite line, one of my favorite lines in all of Warcraft is, and I for saying it's my favorite line, I can't remember it exactly, so this might be a bit paraphrasing, but it's Battle of the Undercity, when Varian confronts Thrall, and you gotta understand, Undercity is the Forsaken Horde capital, but it's underneath the ruins of Lordaeron, which was once a powerful human nation within the Alliance. And Lordaeron was always like Varian's second home. It's where he grew up for a good part of his childhood while Stormwind was being retaken. And so he is deeply attached to the city of Lordaeron. He sees what the Forsaken and the Horde have done to it, and he kind of just loses it when they confront Thrall and the Horde. And he says, I've been away for too long. It's time that I disassembled your kingdom of murderers and thieves.
Yes, yeah, that was great.
Yes! And so, but yeah, I mean, I think the Iron Horde kind of shows that Blizzard on some level recognizes that, and they're like, we want to make the Horde the villains, but we can't make the playable Horde the villains for reasons, because everyone's got to be a good guy. And so, which I don't get, because Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, MMO, you can play as a Sith, and the Sith are clearly the villains in that. I guess it's just easier if both the Horde and Alliance, both the playable Horde and the Alliance are good guys and they can share neutral quests and whatnot, and it would be maybe harder to develop content for both of them if they were on opposite ends. But I sort of see first Garrosh's True Horde, and then this Iron Horde and Warlords of Draenor, and then even before that, the Dark Horde led by Rend Blackhand in Vanilla. That was always sort of Blizzard recognizing on some level that, the Horde are supposed to be the bad guys, but for some reason they just can't make the playable Horde the bad guys.
Yeah, it's, as you said, with Old Republic, they've shown that you can have a bad guy faction, and people will play it happily because it's storytelling, it's roleplay. And people, you ask most actors what they like, and most of them will say they love playing the bad guy.
Alan Rickman.
Yeah, because they feel less encumbered. They can kind of go places with it that they couldn't with a good guy who has to kind of walk this line.
Well, they actually asked Alan Rickman, how do you feel about the fact that you always play villains? And he said, I don't play villains. I play interesting people. So, and even, in the realm of professional wrestling, wrestlers have always said they prefer to play the heel. They prefer to be the bad guy because you get to do so much more. You can do whatever you want, and the audience boos you, and it's great. You're like, I know exactly how to piss people off, and I love doing it. When you're the good guy, you're sort of stuck in that boring, I'm gonna save the day mode.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, yeah, Blizzard, I think, has always been conflicted about what they want the Horde to be in Warcraft, and they seem committed to making it a heroic faction in the game, but there's always that part of them that wants the Horde to be the bad guys, as they should be, so then they create these duplicate hordes for us to fight: Dark Horde, True Horde, Iron Horde, Fell Horde back in BC. So, I think it's gonna be interesting going forward to see what they do after this, because, I think they would have finally run through the orc plot with Warlords of Draenor. They're finally going to, this plot, as good as it's been, I think is really the capstone to the whole orc story. I don't think they can go much further after this.
I don't think they really plan to. I think what they're going to be doing is, because you already see, even though I'm only into the third zone of leveling, I'm only at level 94, halfway to 95, and, I'm getting the feeling that this is in fact meant to be kind of the swan song of the whole orc saga for the most part, and they're handing things off to the Burning Legion again.
Which was awesome, because, one of my favorite zones, I'm level 100, so, I can speak more about, although I still haven't finished the Grand storyline, which I'm going to finish that. But, from what I've seen so far, some of my favorite parts have been fighting the Burning Legion. There's a quest chain in Shadowmoon that you can get where you fight the Burning Legion. And then you fight them again at Auchindoun and Shattrath. Well, not so much Shattrath, but in Auchindoun in, Telkar Forest. Talador. It was Telkar in BC, but it was originally, but it's Talador here. So, you fight the Burning Legion, and it's like demon worshipping orcs. Demon worshipping orcs. It's like, oh man, like for as much as people like to say that the Iron Horde is bringing back like old school Warcraft with like all of the old orc leaders, the fact of the matter is that I still like a big hallmark of the original Horde from the RTS games was that there was an affiliation to the Burning Legion. And so I kind of see the Shadow Council antagonist that you see in Talador and part of Shadowmoon Valley as sort of like, that's old school Warcraft to be fighting, I'm rolling a human paladin for this expansion. So to have a human paladin fighting an orc warlock that's old school Warcraft in my opinion. So they more so than the Iron Horde really have got my attention. And I say that as someone who's one of his favorite characters is a big player in the Iron Horde.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see the Burning Legion come back, at least in some form, and I'm thinking that's kind of shaping things up for more of them in the future.
Definitely.
It may not be next expansion per se, but, certainly at some point soon we'll be seeing more of them, though I'd be surprised. Of course, I said that last time too, so,
we were all convinced this one was that after Pandaria we were gonna go to Argus.
But, so that's the thing, but yeah, I like, this is the way that the orcs should be. This is the way that the Horde should be. And I think it's a really good way to just kind of close out that whole thing with them. And then we can go back to our Vol'jin and Thrall, playing playing with each other under the negotiating table.
Yeah, like honestly, the reason why I created an orc, warrior alt, and the reason why I leveled him up to 90, is because I do find the whole Burning Legion, evil horde, like, actually, like, being the bad guy's story to be interesting. That is what sort of motivated me on that end. But it is not the sort of, goody two shoes, reformed horde thing. I have no interest in that. And, I know a lot of people who are Horde fans first and foremost who agree. They're like, what is this? Like, we're supposed to be the Horde, and we've got Vol'jin saying the Horde is family, mon. It's like, no! But, yeah, that sort of, in broad terms, I will say, generally, I do like the story. I agree with you. I dig the Iron Horde. I dig the Shadow Council and Gul'dan and the Warlocks and the Demons. There is, but I'm going to be a snarky bastard, and I've got some nitpicks that I just want to run by you and see if you agree, disagree, get your opinion on them.
Fair enough.
So the first one is we're going to talk something. I'm going to bring up something that Blizzard admitted to in an interview called the orc situation. And it was sort of a moment of self-awareness on Blizzard's part, where, okay, so let's go back to Pandaria. The last two patches of Pandaria, 5.3 and 5.4. 5.3, we fight Garrosh Hellscream, the tyrannical war chief of the Horde, who has turned the rest of the Horde against him, but we have to fight his forces. So we fight his forces in the Barrens. His forces are orcs. So we fight orcs in the Barrens. Then 5.4, Siege of Orgrimmar. We fight Garrosh's forces in Orgrimmar, who are orcs. Then 6.0, the pre-launch event. We do those quests for the Iron Hordes invading Azeroth through the Dark Portal. We fight orcs. And then Warlords of Draenor goes live, and we go through the Iron Portal into Tanan Jungle on the other side on Draenor, and we fight the Iron Horde. More orcs. And so Blizzard realized, hey, maybe we're kind of overdoing the orcs. And so they redesigned Shadow Moon Valley. They redesigned Gorgrond to kind of de-emphasize the orcs. And, I mean, they're still there, and they still have a role to play, but they're not the primary enemies. And you have other enemies that you have to fight. And they did this to make it so it wasn't just orcs. And I applaud them for kind of finally realizing that they have a bit of an orc obsession. But at the same time, I think it does hurt the overall narrative because they've spent since BlizzCon 2013 building up the Iron Horde and these warlords as being like the ultimate threat. And now you finally get to Draenor, you do the starting zone in Tanan Jungle, and then the orcs really don't appear anywhere. So it's kind of a disconnect. It's like, well, the Iron Horde doesn't seem so much of a threat now because I'm not dealing with them.
I agree with you on that. I think the quote-unquote orc, it's not an orc problem. It's a thrall problem. And this doesn't go back to Pandaria. This goes back to Cataclysm. Mm-hmm. This goes back to us having to fucking be thralls
thralls down away?
Yeah, we had to be thralls fucking wet nurse for an expansion, basically. Basically got made to feel like we're riding side saddle, for, one of the worst raids ever in World of Warcraft, that being Dragon Soul. And,
talk about anticlimax.
Right. And it's not an orc problem, it's a thrall problem. The whole thing of fighting orcs, because they're Garrosh's horde, well, that makes sense, okay? Mm-hmm. I don't mind it as long as it's part of necessary storytelling. But throwing thrall around just willy-nilly, oh hey, look at how great he is, that's not good storytelling, that's lazy storytelling. Now that they've gone to good storytelling, or at least something approaching it, I don't mind killing the orcs. I expect it. It's the Iron Horde. What do you expect it to be?
And you know what? It's World of Warcraft. The first game was called Orcs versus Humans. So killing orcs is not a problem per se.
Right. No, killing orcs is not a problem. It's why you're killing them, what you're doing. It's the context. Context matters with everything. Mm-hmm. And especially in this, it's not a problem of the orcs. It's a problem of them cramming their favorite orc up our ass at every opportunity.
And his fucking spirit journey.
Yeah, pretty much. And now that, Thrall's kind of, he's still in this expansion, but he's kind of on the back burner, seems like, at least so far, to a degree.
I did like it in that one Tanan Jungle quest when you first go through the Dark Portal, and there's another orc there, who's joining, like, this bi-factional expedition into Draenor, and there's this other orc there. I forgot his name, but he's actually Eitrig's son in the lore. But Khadgar's like, hey, take that strapping young orc with you, the one who's not Thrall. And I got a chuckle out of that.
Yeah, that was funny. But yeah, so that's my take on that. I agree with you that it does cause a little bit of a story disconnect. They do try to, like in Gorgron, they try to blend it in at the end and have all that running around you've done killing plant people be okay. Well, you got this artifact and it's going to whoop ass, and so you go up to the Iron Horde's dry docks and then you use it and blah blah blah. And so.
Their leader, and then the boss that you fight at the end of that, like a bitch, smashes it because he's a, sore loser.
Well, he's an orc. So, there's that. At least they try to tie it in and everything, and that's fine. But yeah, I don't think killing zone after zone of orcs would necessarily be a problem. Mm-hmm. Even if they just alternated, kill orcs in this area of the zone, then go back and you kill whatever. I mean, even in Lich King, which you said had the best storytelling or best questing experience, I mean, you weren't fighting the Scourge really until you hit Icecrown for the most part.
You did a bit here and there, but yeah, no, the majority, the Scourge really only became a force in Icecrown, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it was you fought the Vrykroll and all these other things that were working with the Scourge for whatever reason. I guess they just...
Those fucking spider people.
Yeah, so you fought a lot of these other things that were related to the Scourge, but not the Scourge, and you really only started just slaughtering zombies wholesale until you got to Icecrown. And, I would expect maybe something like that similar with Tanan Jungle here.
Well, Tanan Jungle's the stronghold, so I suspect we're gonna get a massive Iron Horde influx. But, I mean... You'd think, though, that there would have been more of an Iron Horde presence in Gorgrond, because Gorgrond's home of the Blackrock clan, which is Blackhand's clan, and they're, that's the industrial base of the Iron Horde. So you would have thought, I would have been fine I would have rather been slaughtering orcs in Gorgrond than plant people, in all honesty.
Yeah, It's a storytelling decision that they made that I don't necessarily agree with, but it's not, it's us, I think it's us nitpicking, honestly, to have something to complain about just for the sake of good broadcast.
Well,
because
probably,
there are so few things I can legitimately say that is wrong with what I've experienced so far with Warlords of Draenor, from a questing design and gameplay standpoint at least. That, you almost have to nitpick to find anything to critique on it.
I've got another nitpick for you, actually.
Okay.
And I'm gonna ask you, first of all, because I'm not sure where exactly you are in the storyline at this point. Have you done the Battle of Shatrath?
I have not, no.
Do you care if I go into this? It's a bit spoilery.
Since when have I ever given shits about spoilers?
I just wanted to make sure. Well... So, the Battle of Shatrath. Shatrath was, the big neutral site in blown up Draenor and Outland in BC. It is one of the most holy cities of the Draenei, and, you have to retake it from the Iron Horde. Now, you'd think Shatrath would have all the makings, taking back Shatrath would have all the makings of an epic questline, and you'd think they would have done that because the battle for Gilneas in the Worgen starting zone is actually a very well done experience. Once you get through all the glitches, it's still a heavily glitched instance, but the mechanics of the quest are still very good. Where you have to retake Gilneas, you basically have to retake Gilneas district by district by the end of it. And so they have that mechanic in place. You'd think they'd be able to apply that to Shatrath, but it really isn't. Before you do Shatrath, you use this little spy drone, and you see that none other than Orgrim Doomhammer is sort of leading the Iron Horde in attacking Shatrath. And you'd think this would be a good chance to explore his character some, because Orgrim Doomhammer in the original timeline was Blackhand's second in command. He didn't drink the blood of Manaroth, so he didn't get the bloodlust, and he betrays Blackhand after the Horde has successfully taken Stormwind and takes control of the Horde, and then leads them on to glorious defeat in the Second War. So, good job, Doomhammer. But But his status is sort of an honorable Horde, character, has always kind of made him a hero, to the Horde side of things. And, they said that in this timeline he joins the Iron Horde, and people were kind of expecting to see his character development get fleshed out, why he chose to do that, is he gonna seek redemption? And you see him, and you see through the spy drone right before the Battle of Shatrath, he's addressing this, army of Iron Horde orcs, and he's like, "Iron blood, iron will, we will burn their cities to ash." And okay, Doomhammer's getting into badass mode, let's do it. And then by the end of it, he's talking to Blackhand, and he's going to Blackhand, "You're slaughtering civilians? You go too far, sir!" And I'm like, but you were just talking about burning to ash and stomping on their bones with the Iron Tide and Doomhammer, the fuck? There's a bit of bipolarness going. Now, apparently, there was a whole storyline here cut out, where they the original beta storyline establishes that, the civilian population of Shatrath were hiding in protective domes, and that the Draenei that Orgrim was leading the fight against were all warriors and paladins. And then Blackhand basically has this doomsday weapon that he's going to fire at civilians. And that's what Orgrim objects to, I'll lead an army against another army, but I'm not going to let you slaughter civilians. And that's sort of where that happened, and that makes sense, but apparently something was cut for time or something. And so that whole context is removed, and from the player's perspective, you just see Doomhammer going from "Rawr, kill them all" to "have some humanity." And so that is a bit of a disconnect.
Yeah, and that's something that they probably should have, gone over a little bit better with, when they were, doing the final builds of the beta before launch. That's one thing that has been criticized a lot, is that, it was a short alpha, a short beta, and that it was almost like they rushed it, to be launched. Which they had to. I mean, honestly, if they had waited any longer, man, shit would have gotten pretty bad probably.
Well, yeah, and again, I think they were feeling rushed, because this expansion was supposed to be out 6 months ago. And so I think they were like, look, we're already 6 months behind, we got to get it out, or else the player base is gonna revolt.
Yeah, and that's pretty much true. So you are going to have, disconnects like that where, Doomhammer's personality or motives seem to just change inexplicably, without any explanation or context added in. They should have left that in there, or put something in somewhere to give some kind of idea as to, why that was and what was going on with that. But, it's one of those, it can't be avoided in games, they cut, things get cut, games, movies, books, things get cut, and a lot of times the things that get cut, turn out to be things that would have been helpful to have had. But, it is what it is, I guess, at the end of the day.
Another, thing that, kind of bugged me was that the battle for Shatrath was actually pretty short. Basically, you get to Shatrath, and Khadgar's like, "Hey, we commandeered this Iron Star. And hey, go jump in it and kill 100 orcs." And it's one of those things where you drive the Iron Star around and you just slaughter orcs wholesale. And then that's done, and then Khadgar's like, "Okay, now I'm gonna do something, protect me." So you kill a few waves of orcs while Khadgar charges up his Kamehameha or whatever. And then, Khadgar's like, "Okay, now I'm gonna teleport you." So he teleports you to the ship, you kill some Iron Horde schmuck, and then he teleports you to the other ship where everyone's fighting Blackhand, and then you do the Blackhand fight, where you don't actually kill Blackhand, obviously, you just have to survive long enough. And then the cinematic happens. which is an awesome cinematic, by the way. But, I don't know, it just kind of felt like the Battle of Shattrath could have been more epic. It seems kind of short, and I wonder if maybe, like the part about Doomhammer's motivation, if maybe there was something more there in an earlier build that got cut for time, and they kind of just maybe rushed it a bit. I'm just saying, I would have liked more of a Battle for Gilneas feel, where, like, you were taking Shattrath back one district at a time before you finally got to Blackhand. I think that would have been really cool.
It would have been, but, we're not getting it, and we're not getting Karabor either, so.
Yeah, Karabor's doors are closed. We're not getting anything.
I think they've done more right than wrong with this. Yeah, there's a lot of things definitely. I would have liked to have seen changed or done differently. But they're all minor things just to make it, I guess, perfect as opposed to just really damn awesome. So I really can't legitimately bitch about too much.
Yeah, those gripes aside, I really have enjoyed the expansion. I'd say the questing experience. I said that Pandaria blew every other expansion's questing experience out of the water. I wouldn't say this blows Pandaria out of the water, but this definitely one-ups Pandaria in terms of a questing experience. The questing, there's always going to be grindy type quests. That's just how MMOs work. But they're integrated in a way that doesn't make it grindy. Everything feels like it flows together much more naturally. And it's one of those things where I really couldn't quest for long periods of time in Wrath or Kata, because it's like, okay, after so many grindy quests, I can only do so many before I have to, turn the game off and do something else. But here, I'm breezing through quests, and it's not like the quests are easier, it's just that they're integrated in such a way that they seem more fun. It seems even when you're grinding, you're still moving the story forward.
Yeah.
So, I find myself, like, having done a good portion of a zone story before I even realized it, just because it's so engaging, it's fun, in a way.
Now, I had one thing, finishing Gorgrond. There's 4 story chapters to Gorgrond, the last one being, supporting your garrison. There's a quest somewhere that I'm not seeing, because I got to almost to 94. There were no other quests I could find anywhere to get. And I ended up just going and, like, doing those bonus quest events or whatever until I hit 94 and could go on to Talador. I could not find any other quests. And I think that, to me now, that's actually a fairly serious failing in quest design.
I almost did that. The problem with Gorgrond, and Gorgrond's really the only zone that's really like this. The others are more streamlined, but with Gorgrond, like, the other zones kind of lead you from chapter to chapter. Gorgrond just kind of spits a bunch of breadcrumb quests at you, and then you kind of just have to figure it out as you go. The best way I can describe, because I kind of had this thing too, is, there's a questing zone, there's a quest in Gorgrond where, I'm not sure where exactly you got on the whole garrison thing, but I believe there is a part where, I'm trying to think. I'm trying not to get this confused with Talador, too. But I think there's a section where it's some breadcrumb quest way out of the way, and I think it's somewhere in the southern end of the zone, where you have to go talk to someone, and then there's a quick chain there. And then after the end of that chain, you get the supporting your garrison, I think. So, yeah, Gorgrond's questing story is very haphazard like that. They could have done that better, but they kind of give you a shotgun blast of quests, and they're like, figure the story out now, fuckers!
Yeah, but I spent a good while last night trying to, figure out what the fuck to do with that. I ended up just, like I said, just going, I did like 2 or 3 of those bonus quest events that give you like 70,000 EXP each, and that got me over the edge. No harm, no foul. And maybe that's intended. Maybe they're building that into like the questing pace, and you're supposed to go do a couple of those, where I tend to kind of, unless they're right there and I'm right there at them, I don't really seek them out. Whatever. But That's the only moderately serious complaint that I've had so far with the questing flow.
If anyone out there is playing, I would recommend you do those, bonus, content zones, because, unlike Jack, I actually did seek them out, and I hit 100 faster than I thought I would, and it's a good deal because of, those zones. They give you like 70,000 EXP a pop. You're almost in awe because you haven't seen your experience bar fill up to such a degree after just one quest since you were like level 2, right? And like killing like a gnoll got you like half of your bar filled up.
Yeah. Yeah, they're very effective. Just a lot of them are in like really far off, kind of like out of the way places. And I'm just like, fuck it.
If you're looking to level up faster, I definitely recommend doing that. You will see your experience bar fill up much faster. But, so far, Gorgron's very scatterbrained in how its quests are arranged, but everything else, flows much more smoothly. I'm still kind of going through Nagrand at the moment, even though I've level 100. I do want to kind of complete the story, even if I have to put up that stupid cinematic where Thrall has his, women's hygiene commercial moment. But, Thrall walking through a field as, serene music plays.
But we have to have one of those every expansion. But so I guess pretty much in closing, I would say on the whole, Draenor so far has been very good. I've had one or two minor problems with it. Nothing that's just had me in a rage. Certainly nothing compared to some of the things that you encounter in other expansions. And I really don't have any serious complaints about any of it.
Me neither. I'm actually excited. I've decided that after I complete, the questing in, Nagrand, I'm going to talk to Khadgar and I'm gonna start the legendary quest here. I'm gonna see if this legendary quest is, less infuriating, maybe, than Raytheon. Raytheon's legendary quest was. They said that they've learned from that and they're not going to do the same bullshit that made that one so unbearable. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
So the one other thing I wanted to talk about, because this was, pegged as one of the big selling points of the expansion. What do you think of the garrisons?
I really like them. I really do. I think though, I can see Blizzard being kind of whiny about it in, say, 6 months.
Oh?
And they're going to say that they're too self-contained and no one's going out in the world.
Well, you said it best when we talked about this earlier. They made them too good.
Yeah, they made them too good
a job.
Yeah, I mean, you can get literally anything you need there practically. I mean, you can get your own bank, your own auction house, your own inn, you have your own flight point, you have, pretty much anything you would find in Stormwind, or you have your own capital city. Ashan is almost
Ashran, yeah.
Yeah, Ashran. It actually is redundant. There's really no reason, unless you have a quest or something that specifically requires you to go there. There's really no need to be arsed with it. There's just not. There might be a couple of like faction vendors or something in Ashan that you can't get anywhere else, but that's just a one-off trip. There's no reason for you to, hang out or whatever in the capital city, as has been the case with previous expansions. So I could see Blizzard saying, oh, well, not enough people are out in the world. We want the cities to feel more populated. So we're yanking your auction house. I could see them doing that. And if they do, I'm going to be pissed.
Well, yeah, I'm setting up my garrison. I've already got the storehouse at level 2, which gives me my bank and guild bank. When I get it to level 3, it'll also include transmog. I've already got the trading post that once I get to level 2 will have an auction house. And so at that point, I've got once that happens, I'll have an auction house, a bank, a guild bank, transmog, I've got a flight point, and I don't have the inn, but I don't need one because my Hearthstone already sends me back there anyway to the town hall. So I have no reason to go to Ashran, especially because my garrison in Shadowmoon Valley is kind of in the northwest part of Shadowmoon Valley, which kind of puts it near the middle of the continent, which actually makes it really convenient, whereas Ashran's way out in the west. So once I get the transmog and the auction house going in my garrison, I have no reason to go to Ashran at all.
Yeah.
Except to go, the only thing that you have to get the only thing that would still be at Ashran are the vendors that sell the guild, no, not the guild, the blueprints, the garrison blueprints.
Right.
But, like I said, once I get to that point, I'll have already upgraded everything to the point where I don't need to go back anyway. So, yeah. Fuck you, Ashran. You know, I'd be more interested in hanging out in the designated faction capital if it was, I don't know, something a bit more holy and temple-like with lore ramifications.
Right, and Ashran is actually just level 3 garrison buildings anyways. So
Yeah.
you literally have the same thing for yourself already. There is no point to it at all. That I can see, at least, besides, again, the one-off trips you have to make for a vendor. There's nothing compelling you or making you desire to go and hang out there unless you just unless you're just having an emo moment and like, I'm so alone. But if you go there, you'll still be alone because everyone will be in their fucking garrison anyway, so it won't matter.
I also love how they tried to build up the worst stranded on Draenor thing, and then by the time you get to like level 92, which
Portals,
is 2 levels,
bitch.
you're like, here's Ashran, here's a portal to every major alliance city on Azeroth. I'm like, oh, well, okay. Well, I'm not gonna use them because I guess I care more about immersion than the people making the game, but whatever. I don't know. It is what it is. I can't, for them to actually make everyone stay on Draenor for an entire expansion, that is a bit much, because there's a lot of things that you'd want to do, like, go Soloing
run.
old content.
Exactly. Yeah, and things like that. So, I agree with their decision to have some kind of a portal there.
Yeah, I do too. It does make sense, but I just kind of do find that funny in the context of the story where they're like, we're trapped on this savage planet. Oh, no. By the way, portals.
No, now what's actually funny about that is that, like, as soon as you get on Draenor, when you're even in that initial spot where you're supposed to be quote unquote stranded, your Hearthstone works.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So it's like, our characters are like, no, guys, I totally got this. Just use your Hearthstone. It fucking works. I just did it. I just went to Stormwind and had a fucking bagel.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. One piece of advice I'm gonna give you or anyone else there who's playing, be wary of the gear vendor at the Ring of Trials in the Grand. There's a gear vendor there. Sells gear, obviously, but it's level 660 gear, which is pretty high, pretty good gear, and it's sold for like 50 gold a piece. And you might think, wow, that's a good deal. Don't waste your money on it. Blizzard confirmed that gear is only usable if you engage in the Ring of Trials PvP quests. So don't blow like 300, 400 gold on gear that you're like, oh man, gear for cheap, high stats and item level. Oh yeah. No, don't do it. You won't be able to use it unless you're doing very specific PvP quests.
That's retarded.
It is, cause there's nothing at that vendor to indicate otherwise.
I mean, I don't know. It's whatever. It's whatever. But yeah, so that's that. That's the thing. It's a thing that happens.
Indeed. Warlords of Draenor. So far, so good. So, that's kind of changed gears into something that, from kind of living up to expectations to not quite living up to expectations. I gave my thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy when I saw it. You got around to seeing it, a week or so back. And you and I had a discussion that I kind of wanted to have on air again because I think it needs to be said. Guardians of the Galaxy, I will be the first to admit I didn't have high hopes for it because they're traditionally Marvel D-listers. Let's not mince words. Guardians of the Galaxy are not, or at least were not, big players in the Marvel universe. This movie, probably will change that. It's been successful. $600 million made at the box office. But perhaps people are overblowing it. And so with that, I'm gonna kind of turn the discussion over to you, Jack. Give us your thoughts on what you thought of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay, so, the thing that got me about this is that people have been calling it the Star Wars of our generation. Mm-hmm. And I would like to say right now to every single blithering, sycophantic idiot who has said this, bullshit. Mm-hmm. Star Wars, and I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan. We've gone over this a million times. I'm not a fan. I don't dislike it. It's there and it's a thing. But even I can recognize that Star Wars helped shape an entire generation of writers and directors and creative impetus in the genre of sci-fi fantasy. Guardians of the Galaxy does nothing innovative at all. Not exactly. In its presentation, not in its storytelling, and I'm not saying that Star Wars was 100% original, it's really not. But there were things that were done with it in terms of storytelling and the way it was presented that were different for the time. Guardians of the Galaxy has none of that. All the characters are tropes from the nth fucking degree. This movie is Han Solo and Chewbacca have adventures.
Chewbacca. Well, I mean, as you said, yeah, Star Wars inspired a generation. When Star Wars happened, when the first Star Wars movie came out, it was a shakeup of Hollywood. Hollywood hadn't seen anything like that in a very long time. It completely kind of galvanized the movie-going public. It was, in a lot of ways, a cultural revolution, at least as far as Hollywood is concerned. Star Wars fundamentally altered how the game was played. Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm not saying Guardians of the Galaxy is a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination. It's not. It's well made. It's competently made. It's competently acted. It's both serious and funny. Succeeds in both of those areas at different times. But this is not, but at the end of the day, it's a pretty good action movie. That's all.
Right. It's a decent action movie. That's really, at the end of the day, all it is. I mean, it's something you can watch for 2 hours and not feel like you've completely wasted your time. All the characters are generic, in terms of their personalities, and everything. You've got Star-Lord he's basically Han Solo. Mm-hmm. You've got Rocky Raccoon, and he's your stereotypical, let's blow shit up guy, kind of a thing. You've got the green chick, who is your stereotypical sex appeal character. You've got the tree guy, who's fucking Chewbacca.
Let's just put it out. The easiest paycheck Vin Diesel has ever earned.
Yeah.
Playing Groot.
And what I'm going to say next, though, may actually come as surprising to some people. Mm-hmm. The only character that I actually thought was kind of interesting was Batista's character.
Yes, Drax the Destroyer.
He was the only, I found that whole thing of just complete literalism to be very amusing. And maybe it's just cause, I like playing with words and things like that. To me, I find that funny. And I can see where others may not quite get it as much. But he was the only character there that I could not quite as easily fit into his own pre-made mold. And yet even he fits into one. I mean, there have been characters like that. There just aren't all that many all the time like you have with all the others. Mm-hmm. So he was the only one that I thought was actually kind of interesting as a character.
He cracked me up. I loved him.
Yeah, so, that was one of the only redeeming points of the movie, that and, of course the sex appeal of a couple of the characters. But then,
Thanos' daughters, yeah.
Yeah. But even sex appeal, that's not hard to find either. That's nothing I couldn't get easily anywhere else, and probably
it's
done
2014,
better.
internet people.
Exactly. I could get that better, easier, whatever. The whole movie, again, it's a competent action movie. It is nothing more. There is nothing groundbreaking. There is nothing awe-inspiring or inspirational about this fucking movie at all. The only thing that's inspiring is that it should have been a pile of utter tripe, and it's not quite.
Exactly, yeah. I came out, I heard a lot, I saw Guardians of the Galaxy. I did not see it in its first week or two in theaters because honestly, Guardians of the Galaxy, they've never appealed to me, so I wasn't in any desire. Like Iron Man 3, I saw opening night, and look what that got me, but still. Point being, Iron Man, I was enough of a fan that I would go do that on opening night. Guardians of the Galaxy, not so much. But I heard everyone say, up to the point when I saw the movie, oh, it's fun, it's fun, it's exciting, it's this and that. And I did hear it's this generation's Star Wars. And I came out of the theater thinking, well made, succeeds in being both funny and serious when it needs to be, competently acted, no real complaints, but I still thought, but everyone who said that it's this generation's Star Wars, no. Star Wars inspired a generation, probably 2 generations of filmmakers. And no, Jack's right. Star Wars story wasn't original. It's the journey of the hero. It's that classic story that's been retold hundreds, if not thousands, hundreds of thousands of times throughout human history. The difference was that nobody had really ever used it like Star Wars had, and then Star Wars did it, and it was amazing because it was both relatable and new at the same time, and people lost their minds. And it just became a significant part of the cultural zeitgeist almost as soon as it happened. Guardians of the Galaxy is a fun action movie. It's a well-made action movie, but that's all it is, and it's not Star Wars, and it's not going to have the same level of cultural importance that Star Wars did. And, that's my final thing on the whole, it's this generation Star Wars thing, because it's really not. It has elements that pay homage to Star Wars, but that just goes to show you how influential Star Wars still is.
That just goes to show you how much it's not this generation Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on it too. It's a decent movie. Didn't make me want to shoot myself. That's really about it.
Indeed. I don't know. It's such a strange experience because I went in not expecting much, and then I heard it was the best thing ever, and then I came up thinking that it was more than I expected, but it was still not the best thing ever. So I'm in a very weird position when it comes to this movie, and I suspect you are too. Just compared to what the general populace seems to think.
I'm used to that.
But you were also saying, it's kind of going off, the beaten path a bit, but, you were also saying that, in your opinion, that Marvel Studios has sort of gotten an assembly line put together for their movies.
Yeah.
And that everything there's a sense of sameness that permeates throughout all of their movies.
Yeah, and on one hand, I guess you could say that's almost a good thing in the sense that you can okay, they're doing with their movies what McDonald's did with a hamburger. They want their movies to feel the same no matter which heroes are in it. They want it to have the same basic style.
Mm-hmm.
Just like McDonald's wants their hamburgers to taste the same in New York as they do in Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine because that means there's a certain level of competency, and I'm not saying McDonald's is competent, but I'm saying that there's a standard of expectation there that you're going to get when you see a Marvel movie. Now on the flip side, that means none of these movies anymore are standing out. None of them are being their own thing. They're a Marvel movie.
Exactly. And people, and I'm so tired of hearing people say, oh, they're so different because Iron Man movies are superhero movies. First Captain America was a World War II period piece, and the second was a political spy thriller, and Thor's a fantasy movie. No, they're all standard superhero movies. Just because you get Robert Redford in your Captain America movie doesn't suddenly turn it from being a superhero movie into 3 Days for the fucking Condor, okay? No. That's not how it works. Captain America 2 was your standard superhero movie that had elements and paid homages to the political spy thrillers from the 1970s, but at its core, it was still a superhero movie. Thor pays homage to fantasy elements, such as from Tolkien. Tolkien is the biggest example, as he is with all fantasy. But, there's definitely that Tolkien-esque homage going on with Thor, but at the end of the day, it's still just a superhero movie.
Right.
And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying people get your heads out of your asses and realize that Marvel isn't changing it up with each franchise. It's all the same basic formula. It's just different levels of homage kind of put on different ones to give it a bit different flavor. And again, it's not a bad thing. It just doesn't turn Thor 2 into fucking Return of the King.
Thor 2, that movie. So very few times have I tried so hard to like a movie.
I was expecting so much more out of Christopher Eccleston. Come on, man.
And it's one of those things where
It's not his fault.
I almost felt like it was my fault for not liking it more. It's like one of those, no, it's not you, it's me kind of a things.
I had that feeling after Iron Man 2, actually.
Iron Man 2, I just seen it, I'm like, okay, well that's a thing. I didn't really, Iron Man 2, I know a lot of people say it's horrible. I say it's mediocre. It didn't make me want to shoot myself.
Yeah,
Iron Man 3, on the other hand, totally fucking did.
Oh, it did. It totally did. But with Iron Man 2, and I still legitimately love Iron Man 1. But when I saw Iron Man 2, I desperately wanted to love it. And I tricked myself into thinking I did for a long time. And then Iron Man 3 came out, and all goodwill that I felt I owed to the franchise flew out the window.
Basically, yeah.
But yeah, I get what you're saying with Thor 2. Thor 2 had a lot of elements. And in a lot of ways, I kind of wish that these Marvel fanboys were right when they said, oh, they change it up. Because I would have liked Thor 2 to really play up the fantasy elements, to really play up the Asgard versus the Dark Elves storyline. Give Christopher Eccleston, who's a pretty good actor, give him actually something to work with as the villain, who wants to bring eternal darkness because Dark Elves, space reasons. But, actually play up that cosmic fantasy. Actually do that, and I think that there was enough in the plot to make that work. But instead, they just, they went back and leaned on Loki. They went back to Earth to have a big fight scene. Eccleston's character was so underdeveloped. I honestly forgot he was in the movie a few weeks ago when I was trying to remember Thor 2. It was adequate. It enjoyably wasted 2 hours of my life on a day when I had nothing to do. But that's all it was.
And that's kind of like where these Marvel movies are going to, where they're competently made enough to where they're not going to be a waste of your time, but you're not going to feel anything really special or unique about any of them anymore. Like, the first Iron Man movie had that feeling for me. The first Thor movie had that feeling for me. By the time they got to the first Captain America, it still kind of felt like, it was starting to feel like, well, this is kind of like the Marvel thing that they're doing now. And it was very good. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it wasn't, I don't know, it didn't have that same quite feeling. Now, Avengers was, to me, just amazing. I loved it. But, Now they just, and I'm almost expecting the same thing from Avengers 2. That's part of what's dampened my enthusiasm for it. It's going to be a Marvel movie. And with it, you know, you're not going to get anything that makes you want to scrape your eyeballs out with a melon bowler. But it's not going to be anything that has you ejaculating in the theater either, because from my experience, they frown on that.
Yes, they do. But yeah. I don't know. I'm just expecting lots of Pinocchio. They're really going to put the Pinocchio reference of Ultron as Joss Whedon almost literally screams at you through the screen. See, he's like a real boy!
Yeah.
But let's move on to something, you know, Marvel, like you said, at the very least, you know there's going to be a minimum standard of quality that will be met, and at worst, it'll be a pleasantly forgettable movie that you can say, it was a good waste of an afternoon. And let's move on to something that is just, you know, that careened past that level of quality about a year and a half ago, and is, hurtling towards the earth. And that is Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Entertainment. For those keeping track, the network latest subscription numbers came out, very underwhelming, still far short of the 1 million they actually need for this thing to be profitable. Company's on track to lose upwards of 90 million this year. Pay-per-view buy rates are in the toilet. Network subscriptions aren't picking up the slack. The world is burning as Vince McMahon cuts and slashes the company's mid-card and developmental program.
But there is hope.
There is hope. There's a glimmer in the distance. The savior who will pull WWE out of this tailspin and return it to the top of the entertainment mountain will once again reign supreme. And that savior is Grumpy Cat.
Indeed.
So.
AKA
yeah.
tartar sauce.
Tartar, which is the cat's actual name. And I kind of wish that they would just call it tartar sauce because that's hilarious. But, Jack, you and I, we are both fans of kitties. We are familiar with cat-based entertainment. Why don't you tell anyone who might not know who Grumpy Cat is, who Grumpy Cat is?
Grumpy Cat, is actually a kitty that was born with a kind of deformity. Nothing life-threatening, but she has this kind of Wilford Brimley look to her face. Mm-hmm. And she's very small. She's like a little dwarf kitty. Mm-hmm. And because of this perpetually grouchy Wilford Brimley style look on her face, she has, as most people who are listening to us already know, become a bit of a meme. Mm-hmm. So much so that she was evidently, chosen to host Monday Night Raw. Yeah. And she is also getting her own movie on Lifetime.
A Christmas movie.
A Christmas movie, no less, on Lifetime.
So, WWE has, done this whole guest host thing for a while. It used to be a weekly occurrence. Thank God they stopped that. But every now and then they'll break out a celebrity guest host. Next week it's Larry the Cable Guy if you're interested. Other than that, they had, Kathy Lee on a few weeks back. They had Hugh Jackman to promote, the last X-Men movie on, where they actually had Damian Sandow come out dressed as Magneto in a move that actually saved that segment from being completely dull. So, you know, they have these guest host things, and they're generally unimpressive, because it's just like, the people, not necessarily who have any familiarity with the concept of, you know, with pro wrestling, they're just kind of there to shill a project they happen to be on, and the segments are always lame. But a few weeks back, they announced Grumpy Cat would be hosting Raw, and so, look, it was rightfully shat on by wrestling fans everywhere, but I still had to see what the hell they did, because, okay, the extent of Grumpy Cat's entertainment factor is that it's a cat who looks grumpy, and you pair it with a funny caption, and that's that. I need to see how they do this. Thankfully, they didn't bring the cat out to the ring, because I would have just felt bad for the poor thing. That would have been, like, terrifying for a cat. But they had this backstage setup where, like, they had this ledge that Grumpy Cat was on, and then they had, like, a scratching post and some cat toys. And then they would have, mostly The Miz, the wrestler The Miz, interact with it in some comedy segments that were not funny. The premise is, okay, The Miz is the star of a few direct-to-DVD WWE studio movies. So, Miz's whole gimmick is that he's a movie star. And so they had scenes where Miz was feeling jealous of Grumpy Cat's fame. And scenes where Miz was pitching a buddy cop movie idea to Grumpy Cat. And it was just so fucking, like, not even in a, you know what, that's stupid but funny way. No, it was just like, this is just fucking ridiculous. This is a waste of my time. The only entertainment I got out of those where they cut back to Grumpy Cat near the late middle end of the show, and Grumpy Cat was sleeping, actually. Its eyes were closed, and it was just like, and it was like, you know, it looked like a sleeping cat. The cat was sleeping. I mean, Raw's a 3-hour show, goes from 9 to 11. You know what? The cat got tired and fell asleep. And I found that hilarious, because the way that they set it up, you had Grumpy Cat's little setup, and then to the side of Grumpy Cat, they had a TV. They're like, Grumpy Cat's checking out the action on Raw in the ring. And Grumpy Cat's asleep. And I'm like, Grumpy Cat thinks your show's shit. So I got a laugh out of that. But
it would have been awesome if it had been Grumpy Cat's checking out the action in the ring, shows cat and fucking litter box dropping a deuce.
And so, you know, it was just a bunch of uninspired comedy segments hosted by a fucking cat, and
quote unquote, I mean, a cat can't host anything except your own misery and failure.
Well, they feed off of that.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, yeah, they crammed this poor cat into this thing, and I'm sorry, I would have to be really hard up for money before I would subject my poor cat to anything like that, and even then I would have a hard time doing it. I would feel miserable the entire time.
Well, like,
it just seems very exploitive to me.
It does, and it's like, look, they got the cat to sort of stay in place, but like the way like half the cat's body was sort of hidden behind this ledge, and like, look, well, like you and I said when they first announced this movie, getting a cat to try to do anything you want it to do is an exercise in futility. So they must have been holding this cat in place, and that's rough for the, like, that's rough for the thing. I mean, I'm sorry. You can't just like hold a cat in one position and expect it to be happy. Like you said, it seemed very exploitive, and the only entertainment value I got out of it was when the cat literally fell asleep watching, you know, the show. That just sort of summed up WWE at this point. But yeah, I don't know. You know, this company has a virtual monopoly, in all practical terms, a monopoly on pro wrestling in North America. They have the resources, they have the roster to put on an absolutely phenomenal product, the likes of which haven't really been seen ever in the history of professional wrestling. They have the capabilities to be so much more, and instead, this company is financially a dumpster fire. The network is turning out to be yet another Vince McMahon failure, only this one's threatening his core business. The whole thing seems to be in a tailspin of mediocrity and inevitable doom. And then they go out and announce their flagship show is going to be hosted by a cat. And the extent of that is a B-level comedy wrestler engaging in unfunny, quote-unquote, comedy sketches with a cat. And this is supposed to turn it around. This is supposed to get me to want to buy the network. This is supposed to get me to want to buy. We are only a week away. This was the go-home show for Survivor Series, one of the biggest pay-per-views on WWE's calendar. And this was the show to really convince me to get the network or to buy Survivor Series, and they give me The Miz arguing with a cat. Like,
I don't know.
The fuck am I supposed to do? Like,
that seems very appropriate given the current state of things with the WWE arguing with a cat. I think we're one episode away from Vince McMahon just painting on his walls in his own feces while singing "I'm a Little Teapot."
We are, I mean, and I can tell you how Survivor Series is going to end. I know you don't follow the product as closely as I do, Jack, but so let me fill you in on what the main event of Survivor Series is going to be. It's going to be Team Authority, which is going to be the team that Triple H isn't going to be leading it because Triple H is retired from in-ring activity, but he's kind of overseeing it, and his team is going to be Seth Rollins, Mark Henry, Rusev, Kane, and Luke Harper, one of Bray Wyatt's disciples. And they're going to be going up against Team Cena, which is going to be, of course, John Cena, Big Show, Dolph Ziggler, Eric Rowan, another Wyatt disciple who's had a face turn, and who the fuck is the last member? It doesn't matter. Point is that this 5-on-5 Survivor Series elimination match, the storyline is that if Team Cena wins, the Authority is quote unquote fired. They lose their authority. If the Authority wins, John Cena's team is fired. Now let me give you a couple month preview what's going to happen at the Royal Rumble. In the Royal Rumble, our Viking Space Lord Brock Lesnar will make his glorious return. And Brock Lesnar will defend the WWE. The rumors are that Brock Lesnar will defend it against John Cena yet again. And so my thinking is, in order to make John Cena look like he's a serious contender to Brock, because he's now failed to beat Brock for the title twice, in order to build John Cena up, they are going to probably have Cena single-handedly defeat Team Authority. Here's what I envision: all of John Cena's team members getting eliminated in some form or another, until it is John Cena versus the 5 members on Team Authority, and John Cena will overcome the odds trademark and defeat 5 men. That's what's going to happen. And so we will have a pay-per-view whose main event is literally John Cena defeats the entire roster. And their reasoning will be, we've got to keep John Cena strong for the upcoming match against Brock Lesnar, which is stupid because Brock Lesnar should not be facing John Cena 3 times. This is your chance to throw someone else in there against Brock, so that when you finally have the Roman Reigns fight at WrestleMania, you can say Brock Lesnar's defeated everyone who's challenged him, not Brock Lesnar's defeated John Cena 3 times.
Yeah, there's no need for that, really. There's just, excuse me, I'm sorry. There's just really not. What can you, they're going to continue doing stupid things. At first it was funny and amusing, now it's just kind of like, okay, well, they're idiots, we've established that. Idiots will do what idiots will do.
I don't know. Again, it goes back to potential. I mean, this is a company that could be so much more, and yet it spins its wheels in mediocrity at the best of times.
Are you insinuating that Grumpy Cat is mediocrity?
Yeah, I love the kitty, I really do. But Grumpy Cat is not the remedy to this fucking dumpster fire. Oh, and all I can say is, why did WCW have to go under? Cause, you know what? I tune in, the way Raw has been going for the past 6 months or so, fuck it, I tune into Nitro. At least Nitro, at least the people running WCW realized how to take advantage of, a live television broadcast. You never saw, okay, yeah, the Kiss concert on Nitro was a dumb idea, but at least they never had a fucking cat host the show. God.
This is true. But who's to say that they wouldn't have if it had gone on long enough?
I can hope. Anyway, let's move back into the realm of comic books. Quick note. The Yellow Jackets, the villain of the upcoming Ant-Man film, the first images of that have been leaked. And all I can say about it is that it looks like a villain from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. That's all I have to say. This looks like a Power Rangers villain. So, good on ya, Ant-Man. Good on ya.
Shaping up to be what we expect, more or less. Nothing new there.
Indeed. Indeed. But let's get into our last big piece of news for the week. Toby Kebbell, who is playing Dr. Doom in the Fantastic Four reboot from Fox, did an interview where he basically said he gave some information on this updated reboot, and what he said has got fans of the Fantastic Four and comic books in general in a bit of a fury. He revealed, the biggest thing he revealed is that Dr. Doom's origin is being, completely revised. For those unaware, Dr. Doom in the comic books, his name is Victor Von Doom, which is stupid, but also wholly appropriate in that comic book sort of way, because comic books do that. So he's Victor Von Doom. He's actually the king of Latvaria, a fictional Eastern European country. And he wants to take over the world because he's Dr. Doom, and he is super genius, and he feels he can, and he should. And that's Dr. Doom.
Fair enough.
Toby Kebbell has explained that Victor Von Doom for the movie is going to be renamed Victor Domashev. Doom is an online handle he uses because he is not Latvian royalty. He is a, quote, socially awkward, computer programmer. So, yeah. On one hand, I can appreciate changing the last name from Von Doom to Domashev because, let's be realistic. Victor Von Doom as a name, in 2014, maybe sprucing up the last name isn't a bad idea. Maybe it's not the worst idea.
No, I agree. I agree with that.
But changing the character's origin to this, I mean, at the same time, this is like the director of this movie actually told the actress who's playing the Invisible Woman to not bother reading the comic books because the movie will not be based on any one comic book story. So, I understand that you can't stay entirely faithful to the source material in these things, and that adaptation will happen. But this looks like it's going out of its way to completely disregard the source material here. Dr. Doom is being changed from a genius scientist / world leader who wants to take over the world to a nerdy computer programmer with the online handle Doom who does evil things, apparently. I don't know. But, sorry.
Maybe he just trolls their comment section.
Maybe the Fantastic Four has a website and Doom is just this asshole who, posts, lolcats.
Yeah, lolcats and dick pics and shit like that, yeah.
Also on the docket, Kebbell also said that they want to, make this Fantastic Four movie as gritty and real as possible.
Translation, Dark Knight treatment.
We're going to try, and here's the thing about that. Gritty and realistic worked for Batman. Because Batman is realistic in the sense that he has no superpowers, and that all of his abilities are augmented by tech that could conceivably exist in the real world. And it's gritty, and gritty works because he's fighting the criminal underworld of a corrupt city.
Yeah.
So, gritty and realistic works for Batman. But the Fantastic Four, at its core, is a story of 4 people who go up into space and pass through a cloud of radiation that gives them superpowers. One can turn invisible, one can stretch really far, one can turn himself into a man on fire and fly around, and the other is a giant rock monster. These are not the hallmarks of a story that one would call realistic. So, it seems like these people don't understand that what worked for Batman isn't gonna work for the Fantastic Four. I just see this being a joyless mess that completely mishandles, the source material. Like, I am not I actually rolled my eyes when I heard gritty and real brought up.
I just find it funny. I mean, it's that thing that they feel like they have to do to everything nowadays, seems like. And at least that's one thing I'll give Marvel credit for. They don't feel the need to do that. Thankfully. I'm tired of it. It worked for Batman. That was a standalone thing that even, DC and Warner Brothers weren't smart enough to let that continuity continue past that.
Ben Affleck's the way to go, sir.
Yeah. So, but, and now everyone's copying this or trying to, and it's not something that really should be copied in the first place. It was a way of making a single film or a single trilogy of films that worked for that. It didn't do anything really all that. I mean, there was nothing there that we haven't seen in action movies before. All that Nolan did was treat Batman not like an actual superhero and more like a guy with really cool shit. And that's what Batman really is. So all Nolan did was actually be true to the basest grain of the source material. There is nothing special or groundbreaking about doing that. And instead of actually, honoring their source material, these guys are just pissed. Not that their source material in the case of Fantastic Four is actually worth a fuck, because it's not. But if it were, then they'd still be doing the same thing, and I'm sure there are a few people out there who are fans of this tripe, who are butthurt, and I don't blame them.
I'm honestly not a fan of Fantastic Four. I'd prefer it if Iron Man just sort of co-opted Dr. Doom as a villain for him, because I think he works as an Iron Man villain. But I've never really been much of a Fantastic Four fan, but I can definitely see, hell, having seen what they did to my favorite superhero in Iron Man 3, I can definitely see how Fantastic Four fans are getting pissed off about this. Because, again, adaptation happens. Understand that. But you can adapt without completely, throwing the source material away. And I feel that by fundamentally altering who Dr. Doom is as a character, you're going down that road. Again, I'm not up in arms about the name change. Maybe in 2014 that's necessary, and I'm fine with that. But trying to make the Fantastic Four gritty and realistic is misguided. It is misguided entirely, because they're not Batman. What works for Batman won't work for Fantastic Four, and what works for Fantastic Four won't work for Batman. These people shouldn't be so dead set on imitating the Dark Knight. They should be dead set on trying to figure out a style that best suits the material they themselves are working with.
Pretty much, yeah. Which they're not. They're trying to copy what's already been successful. And you would think after so many attempts, not just with The Dark Knight, but with movies in general that have done something good that people liked, and then Hollywood tries to, that immediately becomes like the new style for whatever genre. And none of the clones or whatever really pan out the way that they want. You would think they would be students of their own history enough to realize that what they're doing is stupid. But they don't, and they keep trying to emulate successes and getting failures. So that should tell them something.
the most hilarious example of that actually wasn't so much a case of actual film. It was when suddenly every movie trailer was the Inception trailer.
Wong.
Exactly. Every movie had that fucking sound where they just put wong, and then like there would be like a brief flash of action, and then darkness, wong, and like, someone. So basically, someone in the editing room got a copy of the Inception soundtrack. Okay. This is becoming played out, and I'm already tired of it. And it's not so bad now, but yeah, go back and watch some movie trailers like that debuted like a month after the Inception trailer debuted. They're all the same. Every single one, regardless of genre. I'm surprised. I wouldn't have been surprised if there was like a romantic comedy in there to play the Inception sound.
I wouldn't be surprised either, to tell you the truth.
And, you know, comic books themselves actually went through this. When The Dark Knight Returns and The Watchmen, kind of debuted the dark and gritty style in comics. And then every other comic book series tried to copy it, not realizing that it wasn't necessarily the dark and grittiness of it that made it work. It was the story elements that went along with it, but then they just copied the dark and grittiness and without any regard for the rest of it. And as a result, it's called the Dark Age for a reason, because everything got so unbelievably fucking dark and gritty that people were like, enough of this bullshit. Like, people, I understand why it happens. Something comes along and is wildly successful. People obviously want to emulate what made it successful, but they don't really do that. They look at the most superficial elements. Oh, The Dark Knight was successful because The Dark Knight was a dark and gritty movie, and it was successful. Therefore, it was the dark and grittiness. No, it wasn't. The Dark Knight was successful because of the general story that was put forward. The dark and grittiness was there because Batman in particular works with that. But, you know, but it being dark wasn't the reason it succeeded. So, yeah. I don't know, I'm not saying people need to stop trying to emulate what is successful, because, you know, at the end of the day, you gotta make a buck, and if something is successful, then emulating it is not a bad idea. But for the sake of quality, actually pay attention to why something is successful, and don't take the most superficial quality about it and just ape it until it loses all meaning. And that's my rant on that.
Fair enough. I agree. I mean, I don't have anything particular to say about it, because at this point, anything that either of us could say would be kind of redundant. But no, I completely agree with you.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah, that is the one thing I can say about Guardians of the Galaxy, which I thought was its strongest point, was that it kind of just had fun with itself. It didn't. Yeah.
Alrighty then.
But, you know, it didn't try to be dark, gritty, serious space movie. You know, which it easily could have fallen, which is easily the trap it could have fallen into, but it didn't. So, you know, point to Guardians of the Galaxy for that. But I think that's gonna wrap up episode 41 of basically a Geek Show, unless there's anything in particular that we've missed.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Alrighty then, so, we're gonna put a bow on this, episode 41 of basically a Geek Show. You can catch us all on all of our platforms, so that's Stitcher, that's Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, all that good stuff. Basically, at a Geek Show on Twitter, at, basically a Geek Show at gmail.com for email. For Jack, this is Mike, signing off.
Good night, everybody.